I can help you out. 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 Here we go again. Time is up and I'm calling up my friends. Ain't no one.
Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time, give me 25 seconds to explain to you what's going on. My name is Alex and this is my channel. Last September I quit my job and started to do crypto. The technology was so impressive to me. The smart contracts and the blockchain technology and all of the applications that come with that technology is so impressive to me. This year I decided that I wanna start programming. I want to learn how to program, and I want eventually my ultimate goal is to work on the blockchain field. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. That will make a huge difference to me to achieve my dream. And on this channel, I'm sharing my personal experience of learning step by step from the scratch because I have zero background of programming. So here I'm just go on live streams to share with you step by step what to expect if you also decided to learn programming. The first language that I'm trying to learn is Python, and today we're gonna continue with the same tutorial. We're gonna talk about loops today. 2D lists and nested loops. I have no idea what that is. Let's try to find out together. Okay.
In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about two different concepts in Python.
Yeah.
It's going to be a pretty cool lesson. First thing I want to show you guys, though, are two-dimensional lists. So down here in our Python file, I just want to create a basic list. So I'm just going to call this number grid. And I'm just going to set this equal to a normal list, right? Just like this. Now, normally, if we were creating a list, I could just put in a bunch of attributes and a bunch of elements, right? And now all of these elements are inside of this number grid list. Everybody's happy. But another thing I can do is I can make all of the elements inside of this number grid list lists. So
What do you mean by
the first
that?
item in the number grid list is going to be a list. The second item in the number grid list.
Oh, you're gonna be lists within lists.
So I'm gonna show you guys
Okay.
how to do that. So
That's
basically just come down
interesting.
here,
I don't know how.
where I would normally put the first element in the list, I can just create another array.
Oh.
Closed square bracket. And now I'm just going
I
to say
see.
1, 2, 3. And I can create the next item in my list. I can say 4, 5, 6. To
Wow.
make another item in this list, I can say 7, 8, 9. And finally, we're going to put one more list inside of the number grid list, and it's just going to have 0 in it. So inside of this number grid list, right, this high level overall list, we have 4 elements. And all of those elements are themselves lists. So
Okay.
essentially what we're doing is we're creating a grid, right? This grid has 1, 2, 3, 4 rows and 1, 2, 3 columns.
Okay.
Right? 4 rows, 3 columns.
Like
And that's
matrix
kind of
thing. Okay.
why these can be useful is we can create a grid-like structure inside of Python using two-dimensional
Okay.
lists. So this is a pretty cool list structure, and I want to show you guys how I can access individual elements inside of this list structure. So
Let's see.
for example, let's say I wanted to print out one of these values. Let's say I wanted to print out this 1 right here. The way I can access it is by saying number grid. And the first thing I want to do is make an open and close square brackets. And in here, I want to put the index of the row that I want to access. So this would be
Okay.
like row 0, because that's
Yeah.
the 0th element in the array.
Because in
This would be
Python you
row
start
1,
with 0.
index
Correct.
position 1. This would be row 2, row 3,
Okay.
etc. So I could put row 0. And now, right next to this, I'm going to make another square bracket.
0.
And I want to put the index of the column. So this would be like column 1, column 2, column 3. So I'm going to put another 0 because this is at the 0th index
Right.
of this first for.
So you want the
I got 0,
okay
0 here.
yeah.
Now we can print this guy out to the screen.
Let's see what's gonna
And you'll see
happen.
down here.
Number
we get
1,
that.
correct.
So I could also do this for like for this 8, for example. So this is going to be 0, 1, 2. It's going to be row 2
Right, 2 and
column 1.
1.
And now we should be able to print out that.
Column 1? No.
So that's basically how we can access elements inside of this.
Right,
2D
1,
list.
2.
The next thing I want to show you guys is
Or no,
a
0
nested
and 1.
for loop. A nested for loop is a situation
Nested
like I said,
for
where we
loop.
have a for loop inside of a for loop. And I'll show you how we can use this nested for loop in order to print out all the elements inside of this array. So I'll basically show you guys how to parse through a two-dimensional list or a two-dimensional array. All right, so basically we're just going to create a normal for loop. So I'm going to say for, and I'm just going to say
We did this last
in number
night.
grid.
Row.
And I'm using the word row here because I'm kind of seeing these guys as rows, right? These are sort of horizontal rows
Right.
in our little grid. So for each of those rows, for each of the elements inside of number grid, I have to loop through. So I could actually just print out each row right now, and it's going to print out all the rows inside of this list. So you can see down here,
Row.
we basically just get exactly what we have up there.
Right.
But I want to be able to access each of these individual attributes inside of each of these array elements. So
What do you
we
mean?
can actually create another for loop, and I'm going to put that for loop inside of here. So now I'm going to say for column in row.
For
Basically what this is going to give us
column
is each
in
individual column or each individual element inside of these arrays. So for example, inside of the arrays that are the elements of the number grid. Hopefully that makes sense. So down here,
It doesn't make sense
now
at
we
all
just
to
print
me.
out column, and this should actually print out
Print.
every single value inside of this two-dimensional array. So let's go ahead and run this program. And
Dude,
basically printing
dude, wait, it's not working. Why? I did exactly what.
1 all the way down
What?
to 0. So we're
Most
printing out
recent.
all of the
Wait. For call in row. Name error, name row is not defined. Did you name row? I don't know if I named row. I just followed exactly what this dude did.
inside of the
Well, this dude didn't name row, obviously. What I'm doing wrong? Still. Oh, my apologies. My deepest apologies. It was O instead of A. It was A instead of O. Sorry. Okay, sorry. You know how it goes when your mind is so busy trying to understand Python language. Okay, sorry. Let's continue.
number grid. So that's how we can use two-dimensional lists and nested for loops.
Mhm.
And both of those things are actually pretty handy in Python.
Build a translator. Cool.
In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build a basic translator in Python.
Okay.
So essentially, we can take in a string, so we can take in like a phrase or a word, and we'll be able to translate it into a different language.
Right.
So over here, I have this little file, and it basically specifies this language that I made up. So I'm calling it the
Let's
draft
try
language.
to pick this bigger.
And in the draft language, all vowels become G. So if I was going to translate an English word into a draft, over here I have this little file, and it basically specifies this language that I made up. So I'm calling it the draft language. And in the draft language, all vowels become G.
What do you mean?
So if I was going to
vowels
translate an
become G?
English word into a draft word, for example, the word dog, I would look through the word dog in any instances where there was a vowel. So in our case, let's just say A, E, I, O, or U. I would convert that vowel into a G. So dog would map to DGG, cat would get mapped into CGT. So those are the basic translation rules. Obviously, this is a pretty simple language, but you get the point. Any vowel is going to become a G, and then we'll get the draft language.
Okay.
So we're going to build a draft translator. Over here in our Python file, let's start making this translator. The first thing I'm going to do is just define a translate function. So I'm going to make a function here, and I'm just going to call it translate.
But I don't understand. I'm sorry. I need to pause. What is Diff exactly? Can I just really what does Diff mean in Python? Let's see. What does it mean? I don't know. In Python, defining the function works as follows. Diff is the keyword for defining a function. The function name is followed by parameter in and the colon signals the start of the function body, which is marked by indentation inside the function body. The return statement determines the value to be returned. I have no idea what that means. Why do we use diff in why do we use diff? Python diff keyword is used to define a function. It is placed before a function name that is provided by the near. So anything we put after diff is a function. But my question is, does Python understand all type of functions? Is translate a function that the language understands?
We want this to take one piece of information, which is going to be the phrase that we want to translate. So I'm just going to say phrase. And now inside of this function, we need to figure out okay, how can we translate English into our draft language? Well, remember, the rules is basically just any vowels become G's. So the first thing I want to do is create a variable. And this variable is going to be the translation. So this will be the final result that we're going to return to the user. So I can say translation. For now, I'm just going to set it equal to the empty string. So this is just going to be a completely empty string. It's not going to be doing anything. And now what we want to do is we basically want to loop through every letter inside of this phrase. And if it's a vowel, we want to change it to G. And if it's not a vowel, we want to leave it alone. And essentially you're going to be looping through phrase.
So you're going to put
we're going to be adding the letters onto this translation
Can I go?
one by one. So let me show you guys how we can do this. I'm going to make a for loop. So I'm going to say for. And I'm just going to say letter in phrase. And so now when I loop through here, I can access each individual letter inside of the phrase that they passed in.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I want to check to see if the letter is a vowel or not, right? If it's a vowel, then we can add a G onto translation. If it's not a vowel, then we can just add on whatever letter it was onto translation anyway. So I'm going to use this if statement. I'm going to say if. And there's actually this special thing we can do in Python. We can check to see if something is in something else. So I can say if letter in, and over here I'm just going to type out all the vowels. So we'll say A, E, I, O, U, A, E, I, U. So I'm basically checking to see if the letter is inside of this string. And if the letter is inside of here, then we know that it's a vowel. So down here we can handle that case. So I can say translation is equal to translation plus G. Because if this letter is a vowel, we just want to convert it into a G. Otherwise, though, I can basically just say
plus
translation is equal to translation plus letter. So in the case where we have a vowel, I'm adding a G onto translation. In the case where we don't have a vowel, I'm just adding on whatever letter it was onto translation. So finally, down below this for loop, we just want to return the translation. So I'm just going to say return translation. And now we have a awesome translate function. It should probably work. So let's come down here and we'll test it out. So why don't we allow a user to input some information? So I'm basically going to call this function. Actually, we're going to print it out.
Wait.
Print this out.
This
and I'm
should
going to call
be
this function
here, right? Okay.
Translate. And inside of here, I'm actually just going to pass whatever the user inputs. So I can just say input, and inside of these parentheses, I can say the prompt. So enter a phrase. And so now I'm basically combining all of these statements together. I'm saying I want to print out the translation of whatever the user enters in. So let's go ahead and run this program.
Oh, wait, something is missing here. It's this little dude. Sorry, this little dude and this little dude. I think I'm becoming so fast that I was following up with him.
It says enter a phrase. Actually, let me format this a little bit.
Oh boy, again I have a mistake. Print, translate, input, enter. Yes, what's wrong with that? Here. Okay, it needs to be like that. I'm so sorry, my lord. Was never closed. What? What? What is the thing that was never closed? Here. My god. Finally, I want to put here. Oh my god. No, my dear. Just give me a second. Yes, thanks. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
he also forgot it.
A phrase. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's just type in the example we used before. I'm going to say dog.
Okay, dog.
So now out pops the answer,
DGG.
which is DGG.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool. And then we can just keep running this as many times as we want. So I could type in like to be or not to be.
Cat.
This is like a little bit longer of a string.
Wow.
And you can see it translates into our draft language. So that's basically how we can create a little translator app. And that's pretty cool. So you can see we're using a for loop in combination with an if loop. That's a really powerful structure.
Great.
Actually, there's one place over here where we can make this a little bit more efficient. So instead of saying if letter in this string, notice here I'm checking to see if it's in all the lowercase and the uppercase. I could actually just say if letter dot lower in, and now I only have to type out the lowercase letters, and it's still going to do the same exact thing. So that's a little like hack or whatever that we could use. And there's also one more problem with this program. So you'll notice down here, we're setting the translation equal to the translation plus G. But the problem is if I was to start my word inside of the phrase with a capital vowel, so in other words, if I said like on, you'll notice that when this gets printed out, it gets printed out as lowercase g.
Right.
So it's not keeping our uppercase syntax.
I see.
And that's kind of a problem. So we could actually use another if statement in here.
We're still on, right? Cool.
If
Cool.
letter dot is upper. And if the letter is uppercase, then we can just set the translation equal to the translation plus a capital G. Otherwise, we can just set it equal to the lowercase g. And so now we're able to control both of those situations. So let's just test this and see if it works. Enter a phrase, say on, and now we're keeping that capital letter. So those are just a couple different ways that we could make this program a little bit better. But the basic concept is we have a for loop, and then we have some if loops inside of it, and we're
going to try that for now.
That can
just going to skip.
Word for us.
Cool. Comments. Cool.
In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about comments in Python.
Okay.
This is going to be a pretty short tutorial. I just want to give you guys an overview of what comments are and how we can use them in our Python programs. So over here in my Python program, I just have this line here. It says print comments are fun. So if I run my program down here inside of the console, it's going to print out comments are fun, right? So any code that I put over here is going to get executed by Python. But there's actually a special line of code that we can write, and it's called a comment. And a comment is basically a line inside of our Python file that's just not going to get rendered by Python. So when Python sees it, it's just going to ignore it. It's not going to execute.
So why you're writing
anything
it?
out. It's just going to kind of ignore it. And comments are basically just used for us humans. So a comment is used for like me or another developer to write a little comment, a little like plain text. You know,
Like notes you want to keep in your
in order to create
file.
a comment, I could use this hashtag symbol. So
Oh.
I can click hashtag, and now I am writing a comment. So I can write whatever I wanted in here. I could say like, this program is cool. And you'll notice when I run the program, that doesn't show up anymore.
Right.
It doesn't matter what I put after this hashtag. This is just like ignored by Python. It's just for me or another
Hello
developer
there.
to come in here and use. So a lot of times
Or
if you want to write like
please
a little note inside of your Python file,
subscribe
maybe you can write
to
yourself
my
a reminder.
channel.
Or if you want to write a line to like explain
Okay.
a line of code.
Oh,
For
it's not
example, I
here.
could write a
See?
comment that would explain this print statement. So I could say like, this prints out a string, right? Now anybody looking at my file would be able to read this and they'd be like, oh, that's what this does.
But it's not gonna
Cool.
print it actually
So
in the
comments are
final.
useful for
Okay.
leaving little comments in a Python file. If you want to make comments on multiple lines, you can just create a new line and use another hashtag. And so then I could type out whatever my next comment
Right,
was.
right,
And
right,
generally,
right,
if you're
right.
going to put comments on multiple lines, you want to just use multiple hashtags. But there's actually another way that you can write out comments. So you can use a triple quotation mark. So I'm typing out the single quote, and I'm typing it out 3 times. So you can see here, up here we have this 3 times, we have this 3 times. So in here I can, write any comment that I wanted. So I can
You
put,
just want to
as
make
much
it
text up
more
here as I
complicated,
want.
right? That's all.
And same thing, when I run this program, it's just not going to get rendered. So this is another way to make multiple line comments.
Okay.
But the official Python style guides or whatever just recommends that if you're going to put comments on multiple lines, you use these hashtags. So you can really do whatever you want, but if you want to be super Python official, then
Super
use these
Python
hashtags.
official. I like
Comments
that.
can also be useful for doing something called commenting out a line of code. A lot of times when you're writing a program, you might have a line of code in there that is maybe potentially messing stuff up. And so what you can do is you can actually comment out that line of code. So I could put a comment in front of this line of code.
Oh.
And now when I run my program, the program's going to run, but it's not going to use this line. So sometimes if you're trying to see if a line of code is causing you trouble, or if you want to see what
Oh, right. You just put it as a comment and then see, did something change? No, then you get it
That
back.
way you're not actually deleting the code.
Right,
from your file.
right,
You're
right.
just commenting it out, so Python's going to ignore it. And those are really the 2 uses for comments, is to write little notes, write little comments
Right.
about different things.
I think
or
that's
to
so
comment
important,
out code. And
especially
as you
for
go
beginners
forward in
like
Python,
me.
I'm sure you'll find uses for comments.
I want to start writing
Talk
applications.
to you guys about catching errors in Python.
Sorry, go back.
Comment out code, and as you programs word in Python, I'm sure you'll find uses for comments.
Okay. Try, except,
In this
try
tutorial,
that.
I want to talk to you guys about catching errors in Python.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we're writing Python programs, you'll encounter different errors. So different situations could come up, and your program might throw an error or it might throw an exception. And a lot of times when these situations happen, they'll completely stop your program from running. And
Oh.
what we can actually do is we can
Really?
watch out for certain specific errors that are going to pop up in our program, and we can actually handle them. So instead of our program just breaking and stop executing, we can actually handle those errors and do things when they occur. So I want to show you guys an example of using this. Down here I'm saying number is equal to int input enter a number. Basically what's happening is I'm prompting the user to enter in a number using this input command, and then I'm converting whatever they entered into an integer. So as long as they enter in a valid integer, I can convert it into an integer. So I can convert it into a whole number, and I can store it inside of this number variable. Then I'm just printing it out. So let's try to execute this program. I'm going to run the program, and you'll see down here it says enter a number. So we can enter in 4, for example. And when I enter in 4, everything's going to work, and it's just going to print out 4, and everything is right in the world. And actually, I'm going to modify this up here so it's a little easier to see. But let's say we run the program again. So it says, okay, enter your number.
1.
Let's say that I
Cool.
break the rules and I don't enter a number. So I just ignore what the prompt says and I put, some random text in here.
Yeah.
Now when I enter this, the program's going to throw.
Uh-oh.
You can see down here it says value error, invalid.
Invalid, yeah. Yeah.
With base 10. Basically, hey, you didn't enter in an integer like you said you would. Right?
Yeah,
We told them
right.
to enter in a number. They entered in.
They
10,
didn't put it a
so
number.
it broke
They
the
cheated. They
This is a
cheated.
situation that happens a lot. So there's a lot of different situations where something can just go wrong in our program.
Yeah.
And up until now, we've just kind of accepted it as a reality. But if you're writing a real live Python program, you don't want something like this to trip up your program. You don't want the
Right.
entire program to break when somebody just forgets to enter in a number. Right? You want to be able to handle all.
What if we can provide him with a message,
And
like
in order
please
handle
try
it,
to enter a
there's
number?
something called a try except block.
Hmm.
A try except block will basically allow your program to try out a piece of code, and if
Okay.
everything goes well, then we're great. Like we could try out entering in the number, and if the user enters in the correct number, great. But if they don't enter in the correct number, then we can basically like account for that. So if they entered in something.
Send
like
them a message,
string when they're
like
supposed
please
to
try
enter the
again,
number,
you son of a.
we could tell them like, hey, you
Sorry.
entered in the wrong thing. So I'm going to show you guys how we can use these try except blocks. I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to say try. I'm going to make a colon. Now I want
Try.
to indent both of these things. So both of these things are going to be inside of this try block. Now I'm going to make a new line. I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to type out except. And I'm also going to put a colon here. And down here I'm just going to print something out. So I'll just say like invalid input.
Except
So now, since I put this code inside of this try block,
print.
if the user enters in something wrong,
Invalid
it's going to be able to catch it. So it'll be able to catch what the user does
input.
wrong and print out invalid input onto the screen.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and run our program.
Yeah.
And it's just going to say enter a number.
Okay.
So we're going to ignore that. We'll enter this in. And now, instead of yelling at us and breaking the program, it just says hey,
Invalid. Yeah, exactly. We just send
So
them a
it's able
message
to
that
handle the
you put
error
the
that we
wrong thing.
called.
Please
It's
try
able to
again.
handle the invalid input error. Basically, just told us, hey, no more input. So
Right.
this is a really powerful thing that we can do in our Python programs, basically just to protect our programs, right? If I want to have my program running for long periods of time, I can't have something inside of
Right.
invalid input trip it up. So I can catch that invalid input using
So
these
you don't
blocks.
right.
But here's the thing. You'll notice that this little guy down here is getting highlighted. And let's just see what it has to say. So it's basically saying too broad exception clause.
What?
And this is a message that we're getting because when
clause.
I just say accept, this will catch any error under the sun. So anything that can go wrong in my program, for the most part, this is going to accept it. So let me give you guys an example. Let's say I had in my program, I was creating a variable, right? So I wanted to create a variable called value, and I set it equal to 10 divided by 0. Now, if you know anything about math, you'll know that you can't divide a number by 0. It's not possible. So the program isn't going to be able to handle this, and you'll see that this is going to throw an error for us. So when I run the program, it
Yeah.
basically says 0
Error.
division error, division by 0. We're not allowed to do that, right?
Right.
If I took this and I put this down inside of this try block, and I just pasted it in here, it's going to get caught by this exception that we wrote down here. So it's going to get caught by that except. So when I run the program, you'll see it says invalid input.
Invalid
The
input.
problem is that we didn't input something that was invalid.
Hmm.
Right? We just divided by 0, but
Right.
it wasn't able to handle that. Right? So it could not divide by 0. It threw an error. So even though we didn't get an invalid input, even though it was because we divided by 0, it's still printed.
But we need to put it under the print.
We can actually catch,
Right.
or we can accept specific types of errors. So, for example,
No.
in this case, we got a division by 0 error. In this case, we got an invalid input error, right? We put something in that was wrong. It couldn't convert
Right.
the value. So I can create 2 different accept blocks to catch 2 different types of errors. So down here, I can just make a space and I can specify the type of error that I want to catch. So when we divided by 0, it was 0 division error. So if I just put 0 division error in here, now it's going to catch that 0 division error. So I can say divided by
0 division
I could also
error.
make another except. So I could say except.
Oh, I
and
see.
We can catch the other exception that we got. So I think it was a value error, right? It was
Do
we put in the wrong type of value
Divided
inside of
by
that input. So now we
0
can print
or
out invalid.
0, and
So
then
with these
we
two
write another
except blocks,
except.
we're basically able to handle both of these
Oh,
situations.
sorry.
So, for example, if this ends
Except
up breaking the program, this division by 0, then it'll be able to catch that. So down here, it'll tell us, hey, you divided by 0.
Oh,
But if I was to get rid of this line of
value
code
error
and I just
here.
entered in the number wrong,
Print
so I came down here
right.
and entered in a string instead of a number. Now
invalid
it's going to tell us invalid input. So
input.
we're going to be able to specify what happens when certain things break. So when we get a
Right.
value error, we can say invalid input. When we get a 0 division error, we can say divided by 0. So depending on what breaks, depending on what happens, we can actually do different things. And I want to show you guys one more thing we can do, which is we can actually store this error as a variable. So I can say except, and I can say as, and I can type in a name here. So
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Say like ERR. And down here, I can print out the actual error. So I can just print ERR. And so if we end up dividing by 0, so if I say answer is equal to 10 divided by 0, we're going to throw this error and it's going to print out what went wrong. So now I can run this program and it just says division by 0. So it just printed out the error that we got. So that's another useful thing you can do, is you can actually like print out the specific error that got thrown. Now, a best practice in Python is to use these specific errors. So you always want to accept for a specific error. What you don't want to do is just say accept and then just accept anything under the sun. It's just too broad and it's not a good practice in Python. So you always want to be catching specific errors like this.
Okay. Reading files. Cool.
In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about reading from external files in Python. Now, a lot of times in Python, you're going to want to read from files that are outside of your Python file.
Right.
So you might want to read information from like a text file or a CSV file or like an HTML file. And you can actually use something called the Python read command, and it will allow you to read a file that is stored outside of your Python file. So you can use these files to get information, or you can parse through different files and do different things. So I'm going to show you guys the basics of reading files, opening files, closing files, doing all of that stuff. Over here I have this file called employees.txt, and it basically just lists out a bunch of different employees. Like these could be employees in an office or whatever. So it's just listing out all of this information. So let's say that inside of my app.python file, I wanted to read the employees inside of that file. The first thing I have to do is actually open that file from inside of Python. So I can use a special command called open. So I can say open, and then in here I can type in the name of the file that I want to open. So this is either going to be a relative path to the file, an absolute path to the file, or just the file's name if both files are in the same directory. So in my case, app.python and employees.txt are in the same folder, like they're in the same directory, so I can just type out the name of the file. I can just say employees.txt. And then I want to put one more thing inside of this open function, and it's going to be the mode that I want to open the file in. So you can actually open files in a couple different modes, and the first mode is called read. So I can just put an R here, and that's going to stand for read. And this basically means that I only want to read the information inside the file. I don't want to modify it. I don't want to change it.
Okay.
I just want to read it. I just want to see what's in the file and do some stuff with that information. Another mode is called write. So I can type in this W.
Right.
And writing basically means that you can change the file, right? You can write new information. You can change existing information. There's another one called A, and A stands for append. And this basically means that you can append information onto the end of the file.
What does append mean? I'm sorry?
You can't modify any of the information in the file. You can't change any of the information, but you can add new information. And there's one more, which is R+. And this basically means read and write. So this will give you all the power of reading and writing. So in our case, we're just going to be working with regular R. So we're going to be reading from the file. Now this open function will essentially just open the file. So it's gonna like go over to that file inside of our file system, open it
Okay.
up, and it'll allow us to read through it. But generally, we're gonna want to store this opened file.
Even if
inside
it
of
was
a
in a
variable.
different
So
language, will it
I can create
really
a
open?
variable, and we can just
That's
call
the
it
question.
employee file, and I'm just gonna set it equal to this open function. So now the open employees.txt file and all the content inside of it is stored inside of this employee file variable. Now, whenever you open a file, you always want to make sure that you close the file as well. So just like we have this open command, we also have an close function. So I can come down here and say employee file dot close. And this is essentially just going to close the file, so we're no longer going to be able to access it. And generally, it's a good idea whenever you're opening up a file, you want to also make sure that you're closing
it's
the
gonna be
file
in the
at some
results
point.
eventually,
Generally, once you're done
or
reading it,
how you
you can
gonna?
just close it. So that's kind of like how we can open and close a file. Now, let's talk about how we can get information from the file, right? There's no point in having the file there if we can't figure out what's in it. So there's actually a few different functions that we can use on this employee file to figure out what's inside of it. And I'm going to show you guys some of those. So I'm just going to make a print statement.
Okay.
And inside this print statement, we'll basically just print out some information about the employee file. So the most basic thing we can print out is just the entire contents of the file.
Right.
But before I do that, I want to show you guys how you can check to make sure that a file is readable. So before we do anything else, generally it's a good idea to make sure that it's possible to read this file. And there's a function inside of Python we can use called readable. So I'm just going to type out employee file dot readable. And this is going to return a Boolean value, and it's going to tell us whether or not we can read from this file. So I'm going to run my program, and you'll see down here we get a value of true. And that's because we set the file with a read mode. So it's in read mode, we can read from it. If I was to put a W here, so if I put like write, now readable is going to be false.
You can't read, but you can write.
File, we can only write to the file. So I'm going to change this back to R so we can just read it. So once you figure out whether or not the file can be read from, let's actually read it. So there's another function called employee file.read, and this is basically just going to spit out all the information in the file.
Yeah.
So when I run the program, it's just going to spit out all of the information.
But if
all
you
the
can
information
write, how you gonna
how you can
edit anything while it's down there?
An individual line inside this file. So I can say employee file.read line, and what this is going to do is it's going to read an individual line inside of this file.
Which line of
now when I
that?
run this program, you'll see it's just reading that first line of the file.
I see.
And this read line function is actually just reading the first line, and then it's basically like moving a little cursor onto the next line. So if I was to copy this line of code and then print it again down here, I'm saying employee file.read line. So it's going to read the first line, and then when I say it again, it's going to read the line after that. So this is actually going to end up printing out the first two lines in the file. When I run this program, you'll see we print out Jim Salesman and Dwight Salesman. So if I was to do this multiple times, like I could technically print out every line inside of this file.
Individually.
And you can see we can do that. And so that can be pretty useful for reading multiple lines in a file, but there's actually another function that is better at doing that. And we can say, instead of employee file.read line, we can say .read lines. And what this is going to do is it's going to take all of the lines inside of our file and put them inside of an array.
It's the same.
So now when I print this out, you'll see we have this array down here. It says Jim Salesman, that's the first item in the array. Dwight Salesman, the second item in the array. It's basically taking each line and putting it inside of an array. So if I wanted to access a specific line, I can just refer to it by its index in the array. So if I said 1, now this is going to give us that Dwight Salesman line, because that is at index position 1 inside of the array. You can also use this read lines function with a for loop. So I could come up here and create a for loop. I'm just going to say for, and we'll say employee in employee file. And then for each employee, we just want to print them out.
Cool.
And actually, sorry, we have to put employee file.read lines up here. And so now this will loop through all of the employees in this employee file.read.
How much time left in this course?
So we can actually just print out.
Oh, like an hour, almost an
and now
hour.
this will print out all the employees.
Do you think we can finish it today?
It's basically printing out each line in the file, and that can be pretty useful. So you can use all of these different functions like read line, read lines, readable. You know, there's a bunch of these different things that we can do to get information from a file. And so there's a lot of cases where you're going to want to be able to parse through information in a file, and this is an awesome way to do it. So just to recap, whenever you want to open a file and read from it, you can just use this open function, type in the name of the file, and then the mode, which in our case is going to be R. Then you can do all sorts of stuff.
I'm just so interested if you can edit that file,
when you're done.
and if it's showing right here, how you actually gonna edit it from
You
here.
guys can use this in
Needs to
some
be
ways
here
to
so you can
future.
rewrite or write something. Writing to files. Oh,
In
this
tutorial,
this
I'm
guy
gonna talk
covers
to you about
everything. I
writing
like
and
that.
Appending to files in Python. So one of the cool things about Python is it allows you to work with external files. So I
Right.
could have like an external text file, and I could actually like completely read all of the information in it. I could parse through it, use that information to do
Right.
certain things. But in addition to reading a file, I could also write a file. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is writing new files and appending onto existing files.
Yes.
Over here, I basically just have some code written out, and this essentially just reads information from this employees.txt file. So you can see over here, I'm specifying the mode, which is R, and that stands for read. And down here, I'm just reading all of the contents of the file and spitting it out on the screen.
Right.
So I'm going to click the play button over here, and you'll see that this executes. So it's printing
Right.
out all of the lines of code in our text file. So
Okay.
over here, I'm in this employees.txt file, and it just has all this information like employees in an office.
Yeah.
But let's say that I wanted to add another employee onto here, right? Let's say that a new employee joined our company, so we wanted to add them onto this list. Well, I can come over here to my app.python file, and instead of reading from the file, I want to
W.
append to the file. So I want to say
append.
A. And appending to the file basically means that you're adding some text at the end of the file. So wherever the file ends, you're just going to add some text.
Oh,
onto
you're
it.
adding, but you're
So
not
what
allowed
you
to
do is
delete
we
the
can
previous
actually
one.
add another employee
Oh,
into
yeah?
the file. So instead of printing something out, I'm actually just going to say employee file dot write. And when I say employee file dot write, I'm going to be able to write something to the end of the file. So I can
Oh,
basically just write whatever I want. So why don't we add in another employee into our employees.txt file? So we can add in another employee. Why don't we say like Toby, and he's going to be in human resources.
right.
So now when I run this program, it's going to add Toby human resources onto the
To the
file.
previous-
So I'm gonna run the
okay.
program, and you'll see that nothing shows up down here in the console.
Because it didn't
But
tell
if
to
I go
print.
over to my employees.txt file, all of a sudden
Oh.
I have a new entry over here.
Right.
Toby from human resources, right? So I was able to append a line onto the end of this file. But here's the thing, you need to be careful when you're writing to files because you can actually mess up a file very easily. For example, I already added Toby here into my file, but if I was to run this program again, you'll see that over here in this employees.txt file, it went ahead and added Toby again.
2 times.
Right, so it added this employee here again. And also you'll notice that in this case, this employee didn't go on to the next line. I accidentally ran my file again, and all of a sudden it messed up this file.
Okay, how can
So
we fix
appending,
that?
you really need to be careful because if you accidentally run your file again, or if you append something on something wrong to the file, it's permanent. Like it's getting saved inside of the file. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about appending. Another thing we could do, let's say we wanted to add another employee, and you'll notice over here in this employees.txt file, when I appended it on again, it got appended to the end of the existing line, right? So the first time I had a new line there, but if you don't have a new line at the end of your file, and you want to add a new line, you're gonna have to add some special characters. So let's add another employee, and we'll call her Kelly, and let's just say Kelly is in customer service. So Kelly is gonna be in customer service. And if I want to add this employee onto the end of the file in a new line, I'm going to have to put a new line character in front of it. So I can say \n, and this will append this entry.
New line as a new line, right?
New line, so on a new line. So now when I run this, you'll see we get
Dude,
Kelly
it's
from
just
customer service on
so hard
the
to
line.
deal with
So you
all
want
of
to make
this
sure
at
that
once.
you're aware of like these special characters that you can use. They call them escape characters. And you know, anytime you're adding onto a file, you want to make sure that you're adding on exactly where you want to add.
Okay.
So in addition to appending to a file, I could also just like overwrite a file, or I could write an entirely new file. So since we already have this open, instead of appending to the file, why don't we just write a file? So I'm going to use this W. And now, if I say employee file.write, because I'm using W and I'm not using A, it's actually going to override the entire file, and it's only going to put this inside the file. So when I run this and we go over to this employees.txt file,
Oh,
see we only
rewrite
have
the whole
one
thing,
line
so it
inside
deletes
of this
everything.
file, and
Wow,
it's just
dude.
customer service. That's because I was using W, not A. And when you use W, it's just overwriting everything that's in
You
the
might
file.
delete someone's work for
You can
hours
also
and
use
hours
W to
just
create
by
a new file.
this
So over
function,
here, I
right?
can say employee file is equal to employees1.txt. And now what's going to happen is when I run this, it's going to create another file for me. So I'm going to run this,
Right.
and you'll see over here in my file browser, we have this new file, employees1.txt.
It only
So
has
if I
the
open
new
this
right.
up, it has exactly the same stuff as in this employees file. But it basically created a new file for us. And so a lot of times you're going to want to create a new file.
Okay.
And you can use different extensions too. So, if I
So
wanted to
complicated,
create, like,
yo.
a web
Everything is
page,
so
I could say
complicated in here.
index.html. And I could also add in some HTML code in here. So if you don't understand HTML, don't worry about it. But if you do, I could put like a paragraph in here, another paragraph, like this is HTML. Basically, HTML is like a web page. And the point I'm trying to make is that you could write out a web page inside of Python by doing something like this. So now when I play this, we get this index.html file, and it has some HTML inside of it. So that's one way that writing to files can be really useful. You can overwrite an existing file,
Right.
you can write a new file and create it, or you can append on to the end of a file. And
Okay.
there's tons of applications for writing to files, and Python's a great language for working with reading, writing, and doing all that stuff with.
Cool. Cool. Models and pip
In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about using modules in Python.
modules.
Now,
That's
a
how you
module is
pronounce
essentially
it.
just a Python
I don't know.
file that we can import
Modules.
into our current Python file. So, for example, if I wrote a Python file that had a bunch of like useful functions or useful variables or other things like that, I could take that file, I could import it into the file I'm currently working on, and I
Okay.
could actually access all of those functions, all of those variables, all the stuff from that external file inside the file that I'm currently working on. So
Okay.
I'm going to show you guys how we can use modules, and then we'll talk about like where you can find awesome modules and really why modules make Python an awesome language.
Modules.
So over here in my text editor, I actually created this file, and it's called usefultools.python. And basically this file just has a bunch of sort of like useful tools that I might want to use in one of my programs. So you'll see over here I have some variables. This one is telling me how many feet are in a mile. This one's telling me how many meters are in a kilometer here, which lists out all of the members of the Beatles. I also have a couple different functions down here. So I have this get file extension function, and this basically just will, you give it a file name, it'll tell you what the extension is. And then we have this other function down here which simulates rolling a dice. So you pass it a number.
Dude, you're
If I
losing
pass
me.
it like
I
a 6, it rolls a
understand
6-sided dice.
nothing
If I pass
right
it a
now.
9, it roll a 9-sided dice, etc. So this is like a Python file that I wrote, and it has some useful stuff in it. And honestly, there's a lot of stuff in here that I might want to use in the other Python files that I work with. So let's say I'm over here at this app.python file, and I'm thinking to myself, those functions that was inside of that useful tools file, actually, yeah, I need to simulate rolling a dice in my program. Well, instead of having to go over here, copy this function, and I'm just going to go right at the top of my file, and I'm just going to say import, and then I want to type in the name of the file that I want to import. So I'm just going to say useful underscore tools. And Python's going to be smart enough to know that it should go off and grab all the stuff from this useful tools.py file. So once I've used that import statement, I can actually use all of the functions inside of that useful tools file. So for example, I could simulate rolling a dice. I could say useful tools dot, and now I'm actually able to access all of the attributes from inside that file. So when I say useful tools dot, you'll see down here in my little suggestions menu, it's telling me like Beatles, feet and miles,
Right.
get file extension, meters and kilometers, roll dice. So it's giving me access to all of the stuff that is in that file. So over here, I could just say like roll dice, and we could pass this like a 10. We'll roll a 10-sided dice. And now this should actually be able to run that function. So we'll simulate rolling a 10-sided dice. You can see we got 4. And this is a really core concept in Python, which is importing functionality from external Python files. And this is like huge in Python. And this is
Just take a small break because it's a lot to digest. I'm gonna put some music for you. Just like a couple of minutes. I wanna refill my water. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I refilled my water and now we're gonna continue with importing from another file.
Python files.
Okay.
So you'll notice like I didn't have to copy any functions or any variables or anything over into this file, and yet I was able to use all the stuff that was inside this useful file. So that is huge, and honestly, it's going to save you a lot of time because you can write something once and then you can import it into your other files.
See.
So that's really the basics of using modules. I mean,
wow.
modules are very simple. A module is just any external
I'm just
file.
thinking like if I can write something, as he said, like write it once, but is there like functions or tools that I can write them once and then I use them every time I have a new project? I'm wondering.
That you want to use some stuff inside of it. I want to show you guys a place where you can go to find a huge list of modules. So I'm going to go over here to my web browser, and I'm on this website. It's actually like the official Python docs. And basically all I did to get here was just type in list of Python modules in Google. And depending on the version of Python you're using, you're going to want to make sure that you click the
modules.
I clicked on the version 3.1. And over here on this page, you can see there's just a huge list of Python modules. And these are basically modules inside of Python that you can just access. So essentially there's like all of this awesome code that's already been written for you. And so if there's some sort of functionality that you want to have inside of your Python program, chances are there's a module in here that has that functionality. So there's all sorts of stuff you can do. If you just look through this list, like you'll see a huge collection of basically just
if I press
a bunch of either Python variables or Python functions, just things that you can use to make your programs better.
Oh, I see. So you can use this, whatever that is, you can use it for free.
So here's what I would recommend. Like, head over to this page and just sort of look through a lot of these different modules, see what you can see. And honestly, like if you click on one of them, it'll bring you to a page that talks about like how to use it. It'll tell you like how to import it and just, some basics about it. And this is sort of like the list that's on the official Python docs. But here's the other thing. The Python community is huge. There's tons of developers who use Python. And you can actually find a lot of third-party modules. So if you just go online and look up like Python module for doing X, Python module for doing Y, chances are somebody out there has already written a Python module to do what you're trying to do. So if you get good at using modules and you get good
So
at
nobody's building from scratch.
you can actually save yourself a bunch of time, because
Right.
chances are that somebody's already written a module to do what you're trying to do, or like part
And for free, you can use it just
so
for
now
free.
that we've taken a look at all these different Python modules, I want to just kind of dive in a little bit deeper into how we can actually use these things. So you'll notice here there's a lot of files, right? There's a lot of different modules that we apparently have access to in Python. The question is, where are all these files stored, right? When I was over here in my program, for example, I was using this useful tools.py file. Like, I knew where that was. I created that file. I was directly involved in making it, and I just imported it over here. It was pretty easy, right? But what about all of these files, right? What about all of these modules over here? Like, where are all of these stored?
Right.
And there's basically two types of modules here. There's built-in modules, which means they're just built into the Python language, so you automatically have access to them. And there's external modules. And a lot of these external modules are just stored in basically the same folder that we installed Python on our computer. So for example, let's look at a couple of these, right? We have like base64, BDB, bin ASCII. Like, if I come over here, and you'll see I'm over here in my little file explorer, I have my Python project, which is draft. There's also this other folder over here called external libraries. If I was to click down on this, and I come down here, you can see it's just the version of Python that I'm using.
Wow.
There's a folder here called lib, and this is a very important folder. This is basically storing all of those external modules. So you can see if I scroll down here, we have all of these different like modules, right? So here's that basic.
All of it's for free.
Here's BDB, right? A lot of these external modules are stored inside of this lib folder. And like I said, there's external modules. There's also a few modules that are just like built-in modules. They're not going to be stored inside of here. And you can actually tell. So for example, if I was to come over here and click on base64, it tells me where the source code is. So the source code's in lib/base64. We were able to see that, right? I saw that inside of my lib folder. This bin ASCII though, for example, if I click on this, you'll notice that this isn't giving me a folder, because this is basically just like built into Python. So we don't have to worry about locating that file. It's just kind of like, it just kind of works. So some of these are external, some of them are built in, and I want to show you guys, in addition to using these modules, right? So there's a lot of good stuff here, and honestly, you could spend years and years just learning about all these different modules. But a lot of times you're going to want to use modules that other people have written. There's a lot of developers who work on Python and who write different modules. So there's a lot of useful modules out there that aren't included in this list, right? They're not going to be inside of this lib folder by default. And what we can actually do is we can install those external modules, those third-party modules that don't just come pre-installed with Python. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that really quick. So the first thing you need to do, obviously, is find a Python module that you want to install, that you want to download. And I have actually used one in the past, Python docs. It's an external module that you can use to basically use Python to create Word documents, which is pretty cool. So you can like format Word documents inside of it. So I'm just going to look that up here in Google. I'm just going to type in Python docs. And look, here's the thing. There's tons of these external modules. You don't have to use Python docs. I'm just giving you guys an example. Third-party Python.
I'm not going to download anything now because I still don't understand
in my case, though,
what
Python
or
docs
why
is
or
a website,
how.
and it basically
I'm gonna use
just
that.
has like some instructions. So I'm going to come over here, and it tells me that I can install Python docs using the command pip install Python docs. So this brings us to something I want to talk to you guys about, which is pip. And pip is essentially a program. And actually, if you have a newer version of Python 3, it comes pre-installed with Python 3. And you can use pip to install Python modules. It's referred to as a package manager. And a package manager basically just allows you to like install, manage, update, and uninstall like different Python modules.
Okay.
So pip is extremely useful. And in order for us to install Python docs, we're going to have to use pip.
Pip.
So I'm going to show you guys how we can do that. What I want to do is open up the command prompt or the terminal on my computer. If you're on a Mac, you want to open up your terminal. If you're on a Windows computer, you want to open up your command prompt. I'm using a Windows right now, so I'm just going to come down to the search bar and type in CMD, and this command prompt should come up. So I'm going to click this. Inside of the command prompt, we can actually use pip. The first thing we want to do is just check to make sure that pip's installed. And like I said, if you have a newer version of Python 3, pip should come just pre-installed, and it should just work in here. If you don't have a newer version of Python 3 though, you might have to install pip separately. And there's tons of instructions online on how to install pip. So I'm just going to check to make sure that I have...
Dude, I understand nothing.
Hyphen version, and this should spit out the version of pip that I currently have. So as long as we have pip, then we're ready to install an external or third-party Python module. All I have to do is just say pip install, and now I just want to type in the name of the Python module. So in the case of Python docs, it was just Python docs like that. Now again, you don't have to install Python docs. I'm just doing this for this tutorial just to kind of show you guys how this is going.
I'm not gonna do it right now. Yeah, I'm just
what you
gonna
want to do is go online and look up some third-party external Python modules. And generally, like I'd say 90 to 95% of the time, you're going to be able to just install them using pip. In the off case that you can't install them using pip, chances are there'll be like some detailed installation instructions. But I would say for the most part, any like legitimate Python module is going to be able to install it using pip. So over here, I'm just going to say pip install and then the module name, so Python-docs. And when I click enter, this is going to go off and install Python docs for us. So I'm just going to click enter, and it's going to go off and install everything we need for Python docs. So you can see we successfully installed Python docs.
Okay, cool.
0.8.6.
Oh,
so I'm going to show you guys where
cool.
exactly this got placed. So normally when we install a external third-party module, it's going to get put inside of this lib folder. But it's going to get put inside of a special folder in here called site packages. So site packages is a special folder, and if I open this folder, you'll see now we have this docs folder, and we also have this Python docs 0.8.6
interesting
Py 3.6 egg info folder. So these two folders are basically included in that module installation. So you can see this docs folder has a bunch of different Python files and has a bunch of stuff in here that we can use. So if I wanted to use this inside of one of my programs, I'm just going to refer to the name.
I think my version is
it's just going to be docs.
newer than
Python docs
this version,
in order to
the
install
one that the guy is using right now.
If we want to import it, so I could come up here and I could say import docx, and now I can actually use it. So I can just say like docs dot whatever. And you can see there's a bunch of different stuff down here. There's like a document part, image part. There's a bunch of stuff that we can use with this. And obviously, depending on the Python module you install, there's going to be different instructions. But you can see it got stored down here in this site packages folder. If I wanted to remove this, I could use pip to do it. So I could just say pip uninstall, and we could just, again, say the module name, so Python docs. And pip will now uninstall this on our computer. So if I was to go back over to this folder, you'll see that those two, that docs folder and then that other folder disappeared. So they're no longer here, and I'm actually not going to be able to use this anymore. So that's sort of the ins and outs of using modules. Now again, there's tons of these modules, and I could make dozens and dozens of Python courses covering each one of these modules. You know, the built-in modules, the modules that are included by default, and external modules. There's tons of these things out there. And really, as a Python programmer now, what you can do is you can go out and play around with these different modules. I showed you the ins and outs of installing them, and you can use pip to install all these different modules.
So when I finish this course, I'm gonna look more about these modules and pip, because I really didn't understand anything.
But really now it's on you to just kind of go out and use these modules, and because modules are a huge part of Python, and you're definitely gonna want to include them in your Python stack.
Classes and objects. How much time left for this
tutorial,
class,
I want
dude?
to talk to you guys
Oh
about
my god,
classes
a lot.
and objects in Python. Now, classes and objects are extremely useful in Python programming, and they can help you to make your programs more organized.
Let's work on projects.
So when we're in Python, we're dealing with all types of data, right? And a lot of times when we're writing programs, we're going to have to work with different types of data. And there's essentially like a few basic types of data we can deal with, usually things like strings, so like plain text, numbers, and Boolean values. Those three are kind
Guys,
of like...
I think I'm feeling like really sleepy and I need some time to digest all this information. The past like 10 minutes I've been a little bit off. It's just a lot, you know. I don't want to frustrate myself by going so much. I don't want to push myself so hard, at least not at the first couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I just want to take it slowly for now until I like try to understand what is this all about, because I have zero knowledge. I don't know anything about programming, and Python is my first programming language that I'm learning, so I just wanted to take it slow. And tomorrow we're gonna finish this class, I promise. Tomorrow we're gonna finish everything, and I'll try to go through all the things by myself, all the things that I learned in this course. I'll try to build the calculator again. I'll try to build the other game, like the guessing game. And I'll make a research more about what is just module and pip thing, because I didn't really get it. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button if you have any advice or anything that might help me achieving my dream on working on the Bitcoin field and the blockchain and the smart contracts. Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much, and see you in the next one.